MSU is coming off of a 5-7 season where they also went 3-6 in the Big Ten. They were 0-3 against Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. All of those losses were by double digits. They were outside of the top 40 in ESPN's Football Power Index. They were outside of the top 60 according to SRS rankings, also known as the Simple Ranking System. They started the year inside of the top 15. They finished below 500 and didn't even get to go to a bowl game. The most notable change, perhaps, was the offense. The defense stayed the same and when healthy was actually better than 2021's unit. But it didn't matter because the offense was so bad. There was no run game. There was no time of possession. Rarely were there big plays, and the defense was just on the field all the time. And these aren't D'Antonio designed or D'Antonio/Mike Tressel coach defenses. You can't put them on the field all game and expect them to hold their opponent to under 20 points. The defense was 76th in scoring, surrendering 27.4, compared to 2021, where they were 54th, surrendered 25.3 points per game. The offense in 2021, led by Kenneth Walker, Payton Thorne, and Jaden Reed, and Trey Mosley, and Speedy Naylor, Jalen Naylor, they scored 31.8 points per game, which was 39th. And then when Walker left, Jalen Naylor left, but Mosley, Reed, a good chunk of the offensive line, and Payton Thorne returned, the offense went to 92nd in the country, only scoring 24.4 points per game. What that says is Kenneth Walker was worth one whole touchdown every game, which means he was worth 12. He's worth 12 touchdowns to MSU's entire season. Probably more, if we're being honest here. Probably way more than that. That would just be the minimum, which shows how good of a player he was. 2022, in my view of MSU, it only changed one thing. It made my perception that Kenneth Walker should have won the Heisman Trophy in 2021 a fact. And it made me a Kenneth Walker fan and someone who just has to accept, whether the inner Michigan fan in me wants to or not, which it actually wants to. I love good running backs, that he is perhaps the GOAT to a certain degree in Michigan State football history. He is definitely Michigan State's GOAT at running back. And speaking of running back, and this is where I'm finally getting to this, Michigan State doesn't have a running back like Kenneth Walker. The closest, perhaps, I think would be Nathan Carter, transfer from UConn, 983 career yards, 3 touchdowns. I think Nathan Carter could perhaps be that. Maybe Jaron Mangum, though I would put my money on Carter if there was anyone in the running back room to come out and have a Kenneth Walker-like season. I don't think Jalen Berger's that kind of running back, nor do I really think Jaron Mangum is, and the chance that Nathan Carter is anything close to Kenneth Walker is out of this world. Kenneth Walker is a generational talent, developed amazingly by Wake Forest and by Michigan State together. You don't get them all that often. You just don't. So if MSU, if by sticking to Jay Johnson and sticking to the pro-style offense that they like to run, sticking to that run game and trying to build an identity around running the football, and they find another Kenneth Walker, well, this video will be trash and useless, because what I am going to be advocating for is not abandoning the run game completely, but what I'm advocating for, and if you're a Spartan fan, please comment your thoughts on this down below. If you haven't already, please hit the like button and watch the video all the way through so you can hear me and respond down in the comments below and put this video in the algorithm. And subscribe. Thank you very much. What I'm advocating for is for Michigan State to play to their strengths. Their strengths. Not force something, not build an identity around something that they aren't good at, nor will they be good at unless they recruit at in the top 3, probably top 2 of the conference. I'm advocating for something that is more doable, that's more efficient, and that could totally get them somewhere. Not every year. This change, this scheme change that I'm proposing, and you already know what it is by the title of this video, will not bring national championships. It won't bring multiple national titles, nor will it bring multiple playoff appearances in a row. But it might get you in the 12-team playoff a few times. Maybe one year you'll be a top 4 team, and you'll be contending for the conference every so often. And I think currently, with the way Michigan State is recruiting, this would be, whether it's a temporary fix or a long-term solution, which I do not know, I think this would be a great idea. And before you say that the air raid would be incapable of beating Ohio State or incapable of beating Michigan or Penn State or these teams, which there's a good argument to that. When you run an air raid and you run into a team that has a great spread offense or a great offense and also a great defense, as you've seen with Mike Leach teams, whether it's Texas Tech or whether it's Washington State or even Mississippi State, like when he played Alabama or Georgia, they fold. But one thing, and if you're a Michigan State fan, you'll love this, TCU ran an air raid, and they came out and shocked Michigan, and Michigan could not do anything to respond. And part of my opinion as to why that is, outside of the fact that they overlooked TCU, is TCU runs an air raid, which is an unorthodox offense. It is somewhat hard to prepare for. It is less typical, and therefore more looked over than many other offenses. Similarly to the triple option, except the triple option is much rarer, much harder to prepare for because the blocking schemes and the whole triple option thing. Michigan State has the personnel to run this as well. They totally have the wide receivers. Keon Coleman is just one example. Monterey Foster Jr. is underrated. They have Trey Mosley, who's a great wide receiver as well. And they've been recruiting and developing well at the position. They honestly have. Now, I know that Jeremy Bernard, he is going back to Washington, which is where he originally committed, and then Michigan State stole him away. And Michigan State only signed one wide receiver this class. Jalen Smith from Klein Kane in Houston, Texas, who is 6'1", 185, barely a top 1,000 player. But they got 3 tight ends from the portal, one from Boise State, one from Norfolk State, and another from Wisconsin. And I look at that. Their tight end room is deep. Their quarterback room is deep. They also got 4-star tight end Brennan Parachek from Dexter, which is also where Cole Cabana, a Michigan running back commit, was from. They're deep at tight end. They have great wide receivers. And Payton Thorne, for as much as he regressed last year, it was also the fault of the fact that he just didn't have Walker anymore. You couldn't blame him. The offensive production and the ceiling of the offense without Walker just completely tanked. And you saw that in the Peach Bowl. The signs were there that unless they got a beast or a few beasts in the portal to, compensate for Walker leaving, you saw in the Peach Bowl that if they just kind of let things play out, didn't really use the portal too much on offense, and look, Jalen Berger or Jarek Broussard were never going to be as good as Kenneth Walker was. And putting them in there, the offense was bound to regress some level or another. I thought that the defense would improve and somewhat offset that, but ultimately that led me to believe that Michigan State would regress. When you lose a player like Kenneth Walker like that, and you aren't built up yet, you don't have the depth you want yet, you don't have the incoming high school talent that 3 other teams in your division have, you're bound to regress. And Michigan State, they brought in a small but quality recruiting class. It was top 25 despite only getting 16 signed letters of intent. They had multiple 4-stars. It's one of MSU's highest quality classes in over a decade, I would say. One of it. Rivals some of the Mark D'Antonio, better recruiting classes. Probably have to go back to Bobby Williams to get a class which has high quality like this on average, or a higher quality than that on average. Very underrated class, but very small, which is why Michigan State is getting 12 bodies in the portal, a plethora of them on offense and defense. I think Michigan State should become an air raid team, which probably means that Jay Johnson has to be booted out of the building. But Michigan State already they run a multiple 4-2-5, so they do have somewhat of a modern defense that could still work, given the right players, given the right coaching. And I think Scotty Hazelton, toward the end of last year when the defense was fully healthy, did a good enough job to maybe just get him on the hot seat instead of being fired for 2024. But what Jay Johnson did with that offense, the horrible play calling, the horrible mismanagement. I mean, just look at the fact that Keon Coleman was never targeted in the Michigan game after he got their only touchdown. It's ridiculous. And when you have a guy like Keon Coleman for Michigan State, who led with 798 yards and 7 touchdowns receiving, he averaged 13.8 yards per reception, 58 receptions, and this is while Jaden Reed was banged up. Wide receiver was not as good, primarily due to injuries, but also porous offensive line play. Wasn't as good as we all thought it could be. It just wasn't, it's a shame. But Michigan State had 2,880 receiving yards, passing yards. They averaged 11.2 yards per reception, and Michigan State averaged 7 yards passing. They had a 133.9 average passer rating, which, to make a comparison to the rival school in Ann Arbor, as Michigan State fans would reference it, that's about like a 2019 Shea Patterson level, which may make you cringe, but that's average. That's average quarterback and passing game play with an offensive line that was definitely in the bottom 7 of the conference. Now, boy, oh boy, Michigan State had only 1,356 rushing yards. They averaged less than 4 yards per carry on the ground. They were outside the top 100 in rushing yards per game. 16 rushing touchdowns, but a lot of that was on short yard carries where Mel Tucker and Jay Johnson just stubbornly pounded at the ball. 361 rushing attempts for 1,356 yards is pretty bad. And a lot of those yards, a great many of them, came against Akron and Western Michigan. You take those two schools out, which they had a combined record, I think, of like, 6-18? Yeah, I think 6-18 was their combined record. It was either 6-18 or 7-17. You take those two schools out, Michigan State has well under, like a few hundred under 1,000 yards. It was pretty bad on the ground. And the offensive line returns players. They had Keyshawn Blackstock from the portal, who is an underrated tackle. They had Stanton Ramel and Cole Dellinger from high school recruiting, who are they're highly ranked offensive linemen for what MSU's used to, and that's really great. Chris Kapilovic has been one of Michigan State's better recruiters. Nick Samak returns for center. Same with J.D. Duplain at left guard and Brandon Baldwin at right tackle. And they do have some decent depth, and they'll have decent depth if they can stay healthy, which was another problem in the preseason of last year. But I don't anticipate the run game getting much better at all. It's gotten deeper, but they don't have playmakers, and as I've already shown you statistically through evidence, the run game was disgusting. Mel Tucker and Jay Johnson running it up the middle 3 times, punt, and then let Indiana run it for a 70-yard touchdown, which I don't even know how Indiana won that game, but part of that was due to play calling and player execution, especially when it came to running the football. And I think that's something that Michigan State, just with their personnel, maybe give it up. There are so many possibilities with the air raid, especially with what Courtney Hawkins has done with these wide receivers. They have amazing depth at wide receiver and tight end, great depth at quarterback, and they have a decent pass blocking O-line. I think they will if they stay healthy. They'll have a decent pass block O-line if they can stay healthy at that position, and if Chris Kapilovic is worth all the hype that he gets. They'll have a good enough pass block O-line, quick enough receivers at tight end and wide receiver to get the ball out. And I just think it'd be interesting to watch, and I would love to see it happen. I really would love to see it happen. Because Keon Coleman returns, same with Trey Mosley. Those were two of the top three leading receivers. Daniel Barker departs, but Malik Carr, who had a long reception of 72 and was brutally underutilized, he comes back. Monterey Foster returns. He nearly had 100 receiving yards. Same with Cade McDonald and Christian Fitzpatrick, who got some playing time often in later games. And with the way recruiting's been going, I just think it would be interesting. It'd be fascinating. And I don't know if I'm going off here or you think I'm preaching nonsense, but an air raid scheme would benefit Michigan State. You may not have the same ceiling that you would have if you had a more balanced attack or ran a balanced spread or maybe even a pro-style offense. You might not have the same ceiling. If you go to that offense, you might have to kiss any hope of a national title or a consistent playoff appearance goodbye. But you could maybe make the playoff a year or two, maybe 3. If you recruit better, maybe you can make it into, I don't know, like a championship game plan. And Michigan State right now, the way they're built and the way they're recruiting, they're not going to reach the playoff or win a national title. Not with Penn State recruiting the way they have been. Not with Michigan. Michigan's on a recruiting rampage right now. And not with Ohio State, who Mel Tucker can't come within 40 of. Mostly because of schematic matchups. So an air raid scheme, it would change the look of Michigan State. I think it would even give Michigan State more of an underdog mentality because a lot of people don't take the air raid seriously. Look at Michigan, for example, this past season. And it can bite you in the butt if you are not prepared for it. You can rack up points quickly. You can cause teams to mentally break down on defense, give them confusing looks, and you have the personnel for it. Great wide receivers, a quarterback who has proven that he can sling it, proven that he can make clutch plays. He won the Peach Bowl for Michigan State, despite the fact that he was also responsible for getting them down, but he still got them out of the mess as well. He helped them win the game against Illinois on the road, where he had a 70 QBR. Helped him win against Wisconsin, where he had nearly a 90 QBR. He was the only reason why Michigan State was in that Washington game, completing 70% of his passes for 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick, despite being sacked twice. So I look at Michigan State and the personnel they have, and I think that this would be very beneficial. It would also give Michigan State an identity that actually works. You'd be recruiting better at wide receiver, possibly recruiting better at tight end, offensive line, quarterback. Michigan State, I know they like to run the ball and play defense, but you can still have a defense that, like the 2021 unit, and look at TCU in 2022, wasn't a fantastic defense, but often, outside of few games, but more often than not, they could come away and make the clutch play. And if you have an air raid offense or an offense that can score points after points, like Michigan State's in 2021 versus Michigan, you only need that one interception. You only need that one clutch play, or 2 or 3. You don't need to be a fantastic defense throughout all 4 quarters. You don't. You just don't need a fantastic defense all 4 quarters. So, look, tell me down below what you think. Do you think that Michigan State should keep with their current identity, keep grounding and pounding it forward? Do you think that they should stick with what they have but get different coordinators, which I think that would be just as good of an adjustment as well? Or do you think that they should change their identity, try something new, still have the Spartan dog mentality, still have Mel Tucker doing his thing, which I think is necessary to attract recruits, and still have that physicality to him, that mental toughness element that most Mel Tucker teams have had in their history, but switch up the scheme? Go more pass, do something unique in the Big Ten, occasionally give, I'll tell you what, you'll occasionally give Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State very frustrating games with that offense. You'll definitely play better against Ohio State with that scheme change. That's all I have to say for this video, though. If you liked it, please hit that like button, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Thank you guys for watching, and if you're listening via Spotify, make sure to follow the channel. Bye-bye.